Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I am Pritika Gupta from the PGDM General Management batch at XLRI Jamshedpur. Joining me today is Avinash Baliga, partner at Avasant, a global management consulting and research firm. Avinash has spent more than 2 decades on a fascinating boundary where business strategy meets emerging technology. He started as an engineer, writing code at Infosys before an MBA here at XLRI took him into strategy. Today, he leads Avasant's healthcare practice and advises CXOs and investors on how enterprises adopt AI. And he writes a weekly newsletter, The AI Operating Model, that a lot of us in this space read closely. And on a personal note, he is an auxiliary alum. So this feels like a little conversation across the same corridor about 20 years apart. Avinash, a very warm welcome, and it's a really great pleasure of us to have you here. Before we dive in, how does it feel to be back in the campus?
Thank you, Pritika, for having me here. I graduated in 2007, so it's quite nostalgic coming back to the campus. Although the campus has grown quite a bit from the times I was here, all the new parts that I'm, seeing here didn't exist. But amazing to be back. Thank you for inviting me here and for your kind introduction as well. I think thanks for noticing that I write that blog, and hopefully, it looks like you guys are doing your research and really using AI as part of your research. I think XLRI, coming to XLRI definitely was on my bucket list, and thanks to Fulcrum for inviting me and having me here.
Always a pleasure. Okay. So there is a line from the economist Herbert Simon that a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. Today, that feels less like a warning and more like a description of an average Tuesday. So that's where I want to start, not with the technology, but with you. Let's begin with your own journey. So my first question to you is, your career began on the technical side with nearly 4 years at Infosys as a programmer analyst, working on data warehouse migration and knowledge management systems before XLRI and your move into the strategy. Looking back across those 22 years, which experience most shaped your ability to make decisions under uncertainty?
I think, I won't classify it as one experience, but let me probably take a step back, right? I think coming to XLRI was a very conscious choice because I enjoyed the big picture thinking. I enjoyed analytical, way of, analyzing a problem or problem solving, etc. So coming to XLRI, I looked at it as my second shot at a career, right? Because I wanted a stepping stone into consulting. Now, I think if you look at the pivot that I made from a technology role to a consulting role, it was also because I enjoy the rigor of consulting. It combines 2-3 things, right? Problem solving, analytical thinking, and your ability to convince stakeholders about what they need to do, in terms of organizational priorities. So I think, for me, that became the foundation for getting into that career that I aspired to. And I think I will say a lot of experiences along the way change the way you think. It's not one or two things, but I will always fondly remember my time at XLRI because it started a journey that I'm still on, and I enjoy what I do. Consulting gives me all the intellectual highs that I get every day, and I think I am what I am because of that journey.
Makes sense. That's a really great way to put it. Okay, now moving on to my next question. You have worked across consulting, strategic sourcing, transformation, and enterprise advisory. And now you have spent 13 years at Avasant. Which of those roles changed your perspective on leadership the most, and why?
I think, again, let me put it this way, right? Across all those organizations, I worked with several Fortune 500, Global 2000 leaders. Now, I think more recently, from my Avasant experience, I am more in the boardrooms advising Fortune 500 CXOs, and being that trusted advisor, right? So I would say it required me to go through a journey for me to acquire all the skills that were required. But I think, I would say Avasant ranks pretty high in that list because it gave me the platform to be in the room with several of those leaders that I aspired to be with.
Makes sense. 13 years is long enough
Yes,
to watch your own advice play
yeah,
out.
and the tenure speaks for it, right? You tend to
Correct.
stick to things that are working, and definitely that's the longest that I have been.
Yeah. Right. Correct. Okay, this brings me to something harder than learning. Leaders often talk about what they learned, but unlearning is just as hard. Was there a project or a market shift that forced you to abandon an assumption you had been confident about? And how did that change how you advise executives today?
I think it's a very good question. If you think of any large transformation, right? A large transformation, when you advise companies on them, it looks very good on paper. Let's say the business case, right? It's all numbers, analytical rigor. You can get things done. It looks very fancy and promising. But when you let's say present to a CFO, it gets its attention because it might be a cost optimization initiative. But is it the level of change that the company can take is what you are really assessing, right? So the change will be absorbed by the whole organization, which means you have to have everyone else on board, the CXOs, the function leaders, the operation leaders. So the major unlearning for me would be the analysis that you bring to the table is the starting point. How do you help the organization navigate that change? So even though if the change might be possible in 6 months, but can you be successful in 6 months? Can you deliver the outcome that the business case is promising? That's a separate conversation. And that's where unlearning is required, where you try to then start thinking about how do I help this organization navigate this uncertainty better and not have a formula towards this is possible no matter what, right? So unlearning comes from knowing whether the room is ready for this recommendation. Is the organization at a place where they can handle this change? How much time will it take to prepare for that change? All of that is a little bit of unlearning from trying to impress to trying to help them navigate the uncertainty.
So that's a great point. I mean, analysis is the stepping stone, and then you need to improvise along the way, like how things will actually turn out and how should they be.
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay, so to my next question, you have navigated several technology waves from offshoring and cloud to analytics and now AI. What principles of transformation have stayed constant across all of them, and what do you think has changed permanently this time?
So I think every time any of these technology cycles happen, one thing you have to remember is it's change. And change is always seen as something difficult, right? Uncomfortable. And who is going through that change? There are humans who are consuming that change. So just to give you a parallel, right? When cloud came, people were very concerned about cloud security. I don't think we can go to the cloud, I have a security issue, etc. But after that, there were several technological advancements. AWS started a AWS Gov Cloud, and now all government agencies are on cloud. To draw a parallel, what I'm trying to say is, I think every technology cycle comes with a significant amount of change. The only difference I would say between those and the AI life cycle is AI is non-deterministic, which means, two people could use the same prompt but get different outputs. And I think the other issue is all the previous life cycles, India benefited greatly because it was all labor oriented. So you needed people who were very skilled to do it. Even today, that is true, but AI is improving at a scale where it may not translate into as much of a labor advantage, especially for fresh graduates who are sort of entering the industry, because I think it eliminates a lot of transactional roles that was possible in the previous waves.
Right. Like you put up a great point, like AI is the models are accessible to a large number of organizations right now, but you have talked that about in your article as well, like how you integrate it for your organization
Yeah.
and how that operating model actually turns out for you is something that we need to have a look out for. Okay, so this brings us to the heart of what I wanted to talk about today: judgment in an age of where we are frankly drowning in information. So leaders today have more dashboards, more reports, and now AI generated insight than any generation before them. In your experience, why does more information so consistently fail to produce better judgment?
Yeah, I think, it's like more information actually can create information paralysis, right?
Yeah.
More information is useful only if it allows you to look into a perspective that was missing before. If that's not the case, more information is not helpful. So I think judgment comes into play for you to realize, am I using this information? What assumptions have I used to derive my conclusion? What would I be missing if I did not, check for these assumptions, right? That is where judgment comes into play. And I think I agree with that statement that, it sort of creates a attention deficit disorder, right? I mean, if you think of all of us, we are now consuming too much information constantly. I mean, we have our mobiles hooked into social media. So there's never a time when you are without information today. But that was probably not the case prior to the internet era or the mobile era.
Yeah, that's a quite lot of difference now. Okay, so diving into my next question. So with AI now able to generate a credible answer to almost anything in seconds, how should leaders distinguish between information, insight, and judgment? Are those genuinely different things or a distinction we tell ourselves?
Brilliant question. I think, if you think of AI for information, right, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Think of the amount of time it would take, let's say, for you to collect data or refer to 10 different books or data sources, create a information summary. So when I look at AI, I see that it is brilliant for information gathering. Even when I look at insight, I feel AI is extremely helpful in deriving insights, because you can sort of understand, is this data moving up or down? Is it causing a impression on the business outcome or not? Those are all insights that we derive. But I would still say judgment tends to be human, because AI tends to hallucinate. AI tends to create a very fancy output that is so naturally good that it is hard for someone who doesn't exercise judgment to realize whether this is right or wrong. Right? It will look extremely convincing, but the minute you ask, hey, are you sure you accommodated this XYZ into it? Immediately AI will say, hey, that's a very good question. Let me do this analysis and come back to you, right? So the minute you prompt it, the minute you question it with the relevant assumption, it always redoes whatever you asked it to do. So what I'm trying to say is, your muzzle, the muzzle that you have to build on is the judgment, because you will have enough information available to you all the time, asking the right questions, allowing for differences of opinion to be existing in the room. Someone may not agree with you, but you have to hear them out, understand their point of view, understand if you have given them the chance to present their point of view. Because ultimately, when you move from here, from academia into the industry, right, you will be in a room where not everyone will necessarily agree with you. Not everyone will appreciate the point of view you may have. You may be telling them a bitter truth. So you have to make a judgment call on whether the room is ready for you to accept the recommendation that you are giving. So all of those are judgment. So you cannot ever, I would say, I mean, AI is making judgment at this point. I mean, you have autonomous cars, you have so many things that are happening autonomously. So I would be wrong if I say AI cannot make judgment, but I think wherever there are humans, there will always be a judgment required.
Correct. Even on the insights generation part, AI does that, but we need to improvise on it.
Yes.
What we eventually need to, in terms of answering the KBQs for the clients, it's us who are eventually improvising it and then making a judgment call on how we need to position it.
Can't agree more.
Yeah. Okay, so let me put the hardest version of that to you. So take the uncomfortable case where the data points one way and an experienced executive's instinct points the other. Which should take priority, and how does a leadership team resolve that without one side simply pulling rank?
So I think I sort of spoke about it a little bit. I think when you think of instinct and gut feel, right? Think of it as more compressed experience. Now, I have spent 22 plus years in the industry, which means I've built some level of experience to get here. If I allow my experience to take over, and if I go into a room with a predisposed notion that this is right and this is the only way to do it, I have what is called as inflation of certainty, right? I am using my experience to make a judgment call that presupposes that my position is the right position. Instead of that, if you allow inquiry to last, so a good leader allows for people to express their opinion, for them to challenge the assumptions that exist, and at that point, if you have proved or disproved a certain hypothesis, I think naturally the logical point will flow. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. Okay, so you see every emerging technology claim that crosses an enterprise desk. What is your actual filter for separating signal from a well-marketed narrative before there is enough evidence to be certain?
I think you'll always find marketing and narratives in the market. Reason being, every product wants to market itself as the best thing that has happened. So the way I look at it is, what outcomes is it generating? For example, if the pitch is you will be able to do something faster, instead of doing something in 10 days, you are able to do it in 10 minutes. If you are doing something with higher accuracy, if it is giving me a tangible business outcome, for me that is a very natural test for, is it a technology marketing narrative or is it really generating a business outcome? The second thing I would say is, because I hear these pitches quite a bit, you should probably differentiate the demo from real life. A demo happens in a little more of a perfect market, ideal environment, right? But real life, life has its own surprises. Like, you started with the surprise when your panel opened today. You figured out how to handle that exception. Right. So real life always gives a product the best test of how it will operate under human scrutiny, because humans tend to try to find the plan B. How do I work around this? How do I go around the presupposed pathway? How did you test the boundary conditions, right? So I would use that, not go with the demo, but go with how it would handle a real life situation.
That's a very good context. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Many organizations are still consuming static reporting rather than actually working and acting on the inside. What actually has to change for a business to make that shift? Is it the tooling, the talent, or the way actually decisions are structured?
So it's a much more nuanced question, right? Just having the tool doesn't solve the problem. Just giving them access to data also partially, solves it. So it's about, do you have the right organization structure? What kind of decision making ability have you allowed for each level of managers to intervene? I may have given them data, but did I empower them to make a decision? For example, there are some companies which allow a worker to stop the assembly line if they see there is a defective product that is going through. Right. But if he or she was not empowered to stop the assembly line, then the defective product will go through. So it's a very conscious decision that you make to ensure that you are empowering your people. So I would say tools, data, and human empowerment, they all go together for making sure something is really successful. Otherwise, every technology startup would have been successful.
Correct. Right? That makes a lot of sense. And exactly that gap between knowing and doing is really where your own writing lives also, which is the idea of the operating model too.
Yeah.
So you have written that AI models can be bought, but operating model advantage has to be built. If every organization has access to broadly the same models, where do you believe competitive advantage will actually come from over the next 5 years?
Thank you, Pritika. Looks like you are one of the few people who's reading my blogs. Thank you for that. I think for me, AI operating model is different. The reason being, think of it, right? A couple of years back, we only knew of OpenAI, ChatGPT, but then slowly there were other tools that came. Claude came in. Claude plugins were
Gemini.
given, very, very powerful. Gemini came in. Gemini also does a lot of open research. So think of it as we go through this journey, tools will come and go, models will improve, keep improving. So the differentiator will lie less in the model, but how you're using the model. So think of it as, I call it the orchestration layer.
Yes.
What I think of the orchestration layer is, are you using the right model for this work? If I can do this work with a SLM instead of a frontier model at a lower cost, then it is a better decision that I'm making. How well have I embedded AI into the workflow? That makes a bigger difference. Did I use the right level of AI FinOps? Meaning, token usage is a big problem now, right? You can burn tokens at a very high rate, and then your budget is spent in a month instead of in a year. So I feel that's where, when I talk of operating model and orchestration layer, it is how you have integrated AI to be a good part of your design, and how it sort of allows you to bring new solutions into play as the market improvises. So you're not stuck with, let's say, one vendor or one type of model. You can keep improvising, and for that you need a very different flexible architecture.
Correct. Flexibility is obviously the key. That's a great point. Okay, so a recurring theme in your writing is that the operating model and the orchestration layer matter more than the models. Could you translate that into practical business terms and describe what an organization that got this right actually does differently?
Okay, so maybe so let me take the orchestration part again, right? In my view, what will happen in the future is, the organizations that really lead the race will create a layer of orchestration which will determine how I consume my data. Which means the orchestration layer will have, ability to access the right agents, which means I have a multi-agent architecture. I will have the ability to access multi-clouds, because no client is on a single cloud environment. They have Azure, they have AWS, they have Google Cloud, etc. How am I managing my financial spend while I'm doing it? Which is why the AI FinOps discipline, right? So on and so forth. I mean, where I'm going with this is, how thoughtful have you been in designing that whole orchestration layer, so that you can keep adding new agents, new models, new applications as and when you like, versus getting stuck into one way of working. I think that is where orchestration really moves the needle, and it requires you to think at the foundation level. You cannot create a orchestration layer as an afterthought. It has to be thought upfront.
One of the building stones. Okay. Also, a big part of that architecture in your writing is governance. So you have argued that governance is no longer the brake on AI, but the system that determines whether it scales, and that most organizations still treat it as a policy. What do you think governance is so persistently misunderstood? Why do you think it is being misunderstood? And what's the guardrail leaders underestimate until something goes wrong?
So, brilliant question. I think of it this way, and let me take an example, right?
Sure.
Let's take USA. It is a multi-state regime, which means, and each state has different laws. California has a certain set of laws. New York has a certain set of laws. Now, let's say you decide to create a patient chatbot. Now, if it's a patient in California, a different set of rules apply. If it's a patient in New York, a different set of rules may apply, which means you have to be context aware.
Correct.
Who is this who is trying to consume this information? What is the jurisdiction that is applicable to me? Is it California? Is it New York? And now think multi-country. I designed a chatbot. I have multi-country operations. Like there are several firms which are multi-country. They operate in US, Europe, Asia, etc. You may have designed a system, but depending on who is using it where, it may require a different jurisdiction. So to answer your question, governance is always thought of as a compliance requirement.
Right.
But if you move beyond that thought process, governance allows you to create trust. So think of it as, if I'm a patient and my claim gets denied, I need to be able to understand why did it get denied, who denied it, why was it denied. I have a series of questions, and for you, governance becomes then the trust layer. If you're able to demonstrate that the AI I'm using has trust, has transparency, explainability, and all of that good stuff, that is what allows you to scale. Because if people don't trust your technology, they won't use it. They will always ask for, let me speak to a human
Right.
option, right?
Correct.
You've experienced as a consumer.
Definitely.
So there are times when you call a call center and then you look for that option,
Where we can talk to an
the
agent,
human.
yeah.
So that is the failure of technology.
Correct.
And then you have to now think of it from a compliance point of view as well. But I think putting governance in a very narrow bucket of compliance is a very short-sighted way of looking at it. I look at it more as trust building.
Makes sense. Thanks for the context. To the next question, every enterprise is deploying generative AI and results vary widely. From your vantage point, what separates the organizations building lasting, measurable capability from those running perpetual pilots?
I think, people who are experimenting with new technology obviously will have pilots, right?
Right.
For me, to separate AI systems giving different outputs is not so strange, because AI by itself is non-deterministic. So I don't expect it to give me the same output. It's just like if you're in a room and you're talking to two humans, both of them can have a very different perspective about the same problem. So the same principle would apply here. So to be successful at AI, I think, you have to think beyond just the technology implication. Did I relook at this? Because most of the things that have been designed today have been designed from a human point of view.
Right.
Now, if we get AI to intervene, have we just put a layer of AI on top, or have we redesigned that process to become AI centric, right? And I think that's where a conscious governance as a foundation, orchestration layer, and being very thoughtful of how do you sort of build the AI architecture so that you don't stall at pilots. See, pilots stall when they don't give you business outcomes. And so for you to have business outcomes, you have to be very thoughtful about how do I measure outcomes, what matters, what does not matter. And I think, look, every organization will go through a learning curve. They will experiment, but at some point of time, we will see more organizations succeeding at it than failing at it.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very unique way of looking at it, like the orchestration layer and your governance part, that really adds a very good angle on how we can, think about these things moving into the future. So deciding to start an AI initiative is easy. Deciding to stop one is not. What principles do you share with executives on when to scale, when to pivot, and when to shut something down?
I mean, again, a very good question. So I'll probably take a step back to this, right? No decision is made only in the meeting room. That's where you see the decision sort of being live, etc.
Right.
There's a lot of thought process that goes outside of it. The hallway conversations, the coffee conversations, or the dinner conversations that people have. I think we have to look at it from a perspective of how have we enabled decision making. How have we let's say, I'll use the same example again. A business case looks very fancy, that you can achieve everything in 6 months, right? But let's say the CFO agrees to it because it gives you a lot of savings. But as you go through the program, you don't see adoption.
Yeah.
So it becomes your job as an advisor to be able to bubble it up and say, hey, I don't think we are moving at the pace that we should have been. You have to rethink the rollout, because at the end of the day, what you are doing is gaining credibility.
Correct.
The ability to give them some level of unfiltered truth so that they can be successful in their job. If we do it very well as a consultant, as an advisor, then we add value overall. So this happens more often than you think. Things don't go as per plan, but how do you then bring it up quickly enough and deliver it? Because delivering it appropriately is the art of convincing the stakeholder to make that decision otherwise.
Yeah, makes sense. Communicating properly, and then also to your point, being a good listener.
Yes.
And actually understanding what the room is looking for and seeking out. Okay, so I want to bring this closer to home, to India, and to the GCC story you have spent years on. My next question is around that. India's GCC ecosystem is shifting from execution hub to a center for innovation and product ownership. What's genuinely drifting that shift, and what has to structurally change inside a traditional GCC for it to work?
I think, a good point. Lot of the initial wave that happened was built on labor arbitrage in India, because we are by a broad brush services industry, right? Now, I think as you flip to the AI era, lot of transactional roles will cease to exist. Incident management, service desk, some of the most basic password reset cases, automation will play a much bigger role. Now, I think the next wave of innovation will come out of how we reinvent our role in the global ecosystem. How do GCCs maybe help the global enterprise scale AI, scale innovation, and become more the hub where innovation is delivered? I think it's already happening. We are seeing a lot of global roles moving to some of the GCCs, and I think we are on the path towards becoming the enabler of innovation. So, but change takes time, Pritika. Nothing happens overnight.
Makes sense. That's a very valid point. So, looking a decade out, how do you see AI redefining the role? Like you have already, I think, answered a bit to it. But how do you see AI redefining the role of GCCs? Do they become innovation hubs, decision hubs, or something we don't have a name for yet?
I mean, maybe I'll answer it in a different way, right? 25 years back, when you got an assignment, you had to, not you, but we had to go to the library, refer to a book. In many cases, Google didn't exist the way it existed today. Today, you have AI at your fingertips. So, if you get an assignment, you can just slip it into an AI engine. It can create your first cut of the answers within less than 5 minutes, right? In seconds. So I think the power of AI lies in how are we reviewing our enterprise workflows? What have we taken for granted? Can we reduce cycle time here? What business outcomes can we deliver? I think if we start looking at what impact we are creating, I think that changes the conversation, and the role of the GCC becomes more than a place where work is getting done at a lower cost. It becomes a enabler for innovation, or a AI COE. I don't know what the term will be, because GCCs have been rephrased into various terms like captive, GIC, GCC, and every few years we go through a new sort of terminology. But I think AI is here to stay. We all have to adapt, and I think that adaptation is already happening.
Makes sense. So underneath all of it sits a word we have all overused for a decade: digital transformation. So digital transformation has been a buzzword for years. What actually distinguishes the organizations that genuinely transform from those that simply digitize existing processes?
I think you said it in a way in your question.
Yeah.
For me, digitization is you take an existing process, maybe it is manual, and then put a digital layer to it, which is, it could be a new screen or a new UI, but essentially it's the same thing. Like, 30 years back, people used to go to a railway station, fill a physical form to
Yeah.
book their train ticket. But, what if we did not completely reinvent it, right? Now, I think for me, the transformation happens when you really relook the whole process. So it could be today I need to go through 5 forms to book my ticket.
Right.
Can I do it in 2 forms? Do I need to submit something 3 times? Do I need to press next 4 times? Essentially what I'm saying is, if you re-architect the process, re-look at what can AI do in the background,
Correct.
what do you need to do as human layer is required for you to approve, review. The judgment layer will stay human, in my opinion, to a large extent. So that for me is transformation. So real transformation happens when you completely reinvent it and it delivers some good business value in terms of reduced time, improved accuracy, lower effort. Digitization was probably the first level of automation or transformation.
Yeah. So basically, wherever we can save time and build an optimization for a
Yes.
particular task. Okay, so let's look ahead, and then I have a slightly different question for you before we close. If we were having this conversation 5 years from now, what do you think would have changed most? Not in technology itself, but in the way leaders actually make decisions.
Very good question. I think if you think of the big picture, right, leaders will continue to interact with other humans, which means, you are going to make a decision in a room of people. The minute you have a room full of people, it becomes important. I call it reading the room.
Yeah.
For example, the CFO priorities are different from the CIO priorities. The operations leader priorities are different from, let's say, the CEO priorities. How are you reading the room? So, if I were to imagine a future, what I would try to do is relook the importance that we give to reading the room, the softer aspects of understanding organizational culture, organizational decision making, and how do you arrive at a judgment that is acceptable to everyone in the room. Because whether you like it or not, it may not be one person who has to be on board. There is a multitude of people in an organization who have to sign off on an initiative for it to be successful. And I feel that part of complexity will always exist, but we will start focusing more on that, because a lot of analysis AI can do on its own, but the softer part, the judgment part, will require us to be more convincing about how acceptable our recommendations are.
Correct. That's a great way to put it. So before the final couple of questions, I want to step outside over a theme for a moment. You have hired and mentored a lot of young talent over the years, so I'd value your perspective on this. So 1 year MBA programs are becoming a lot more common in India, much as they have long been the preferred format in the US and Europe. As someone who hires and works alongside these graduates, what's your take on the 1 year format? What do you expect from students who come through it? And where do you see it adding the most value to a career?
I mean, in general, from what I have observed in the market, the 1 year program has people who have spent enough time in the industry. Different institutes have different entry criteria, but generally they come with, at least 3 to 5 years of experience, which means, they've gone through some organization culture, they've understood how decision making works, they've probably gone through a few appraisals, they understand that you don't always get appreciated for all the work that you do, etc. So for me, the 1 year program definitely brings to the industry a set of professionals who are slightly more organizationally aware. Because if you compare it with someone, let's say, who is going to experience a enterprise for the first time, I don't think they'll have a good appreciation of the softer aspects such as bias, power, influence. I call this, in fact, I've been working on this concept you know, called the room before the room. Essentially, what I mean by that is lot of what we see in action within the meeting room is the impression of the decision making that we have. But in reality, there are a lot of conversations that have happened offline between key decision makers, between people who needed some sort of a expression of their opinion, etc. Which means where I'm coming to is someone who has experienced an enterprise, gone through some of these cycles, has a better appreciation of what to navigate in an enterprise. Large organizations can be very, very complicated. It may take you 5 steps, before you could get to the leader who might be making the decision. You might be doing the work, but your work is being presented in a room that you're not present, which means it may not be fully represented the way you created it. Now, I think that's where someone who spent some time in the industry has a broader appreciation of implications of that, and I feel that's the value that the experienced professionals bring. Because if you take any program like the XLRI program, it gives you academic rigor, it gives you analytical thinking. uh, you know every day you have 5 assignments and multiple projects that you are working on, you have deadlines that you are chasing. All of it cumulatively prepares you for handling the pressure that you will have. And I'm sure some of you are aspiring to be consultants, and a consulting journey again comes with its own rigor, right? So overall, I feel as long as you use your experience as a competitive advantage, the way you are able to demonstrate that experience at work, that really makes a big difference in what I see when I hire a person. If they can demonstrate the maturity, because even if I talk about myself, right, in the early years, you tend to think that work is good enough, it will speak for itself, but slowly you realize that there is visibility that is required beyond the slides that you've created. You have to have the power to influence the stakeholders in the room, and that maturity comes with being in the process, being molded for that role. And I feel 1 year programs add their own value there.
So, if you had to leave everyone listening with a single thought on judgment in the age of information over abundance, what would you want them to remember?
I think judgment will always remain, and as an advisor, your ask is to be sought for judgment and not for information on data. So I think our role will always remain.
Makes sense. I'll quickly close this with some rapid fire questions. These are totally basic ones and don't overthink it. So, chai or coffee before a high stakes advisory meeting?
Coffee.
Okay. The most overused tech buzzword in boardrooms today?
AI.
One AI myth you wish business leaders would stop believing?
That all of automation will come on my PNL.
Okay. The first app you open every morning?
I open my health app to see how I have slept, how my recovery is, etc.
A hobby your colleagues would be surprised you have?
Writing.
Okay. One book that shaped your leadership philosophy?
Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene.
Great. A movie you can rewatch any number of times?
It's an oldie, Angur by Sanjeev Kumar.
Oh, that's a great one. Okay. Thank you so much, Avinash. This was genuinely insightful. Thank you for making the time for this and for a conversation I'll be thinking of for a while. On behalf of the XLRI Jamshedpur community, thank you for being part of this. This is Pritika Gupta signing off.
Thank you, Pritika.
Thank you so much.